Once my date variable is formatted as a date, then I can do things make plots. So here's a terrible visualization that you should never use for anything, but the point of this is that it's possible to actually understand these variables now. So this is a plot where the x-axis is the date of the interview and the y-axis is this new times per year variable that I made. Now this graphic does not tell us anything useful, but the point is that we are now able to order the interviews by their dates in terms of number of days passed in some initial date. So this is an increasing order of interviews, but then label the axes with the actual years. And we also have this other variable that's actually meaningful now in terms of how often you check your blood sugar. So at least the variables mean something now, and then we should do a ton of work to make this graphic actually understandable and useful, because this is not an example of a good graphic. Often it's helpful, once you've cleaned up the variables, to create a new version of the data set that you can save that only contains the variables that you actually want. And there are several ways to get a subset. If you've already created the variables as columns in your data set, then all you need to do is literally take a subset of your data set. So if I want this subset to be called subset, I can set it equal to BRFSS, where I want all the rows, comma, these particular columns with these names. And so if I run that, then I can also just check the dimension of it, and I can see, yeah, that now has only 4 columns. So that is a good subset of my data. Suppose that when you're creating the variables, you didn't actually make them part of your new data, so I can do that right here. Suppose I want to create a new variable that is equal to 1 if times per year is greater than 2,000 and 0 otherwise. I can run this right here. Now this new variable I did not make part of the data set. This is not a column in my data set, but if I want to create a new data set that contains this variable, I can do it this way. I can say data.frame and then list within the parentheses all the columns I want to have in my data frame. For example, this new variable times per year, and maybe also the times per year high, then maybe also this times per year variable from the BRFSS data set. So if I run this, that'll give me a subset of data as well. If what I want is a matrix rather than a data set, remember there are certain things that you can only do with data frames, and certain things you can only do with matrices as well, though it's less common. You can bind together columns this way using cbind instead of data frame, and that'll have a very similar result. And again, I can look at the beginning of that if I want to. They're all NAs because most of the people didn't have diabetes and therefore didn't answer this question. The point is, you can see I have 2 columns here. There's also a command called rbind. If you have 2 data sets that have the same columns with different rows in them and you want to stack them on top of each other, you can use the command rbind for that. Once I have a data set that contains only the variables I care about, there's multiple ways to save it. If I want to write it to an Excel file, to a CSV, I can do it this way. I say write.csv and then the name of my R object that contains the data set. And then file equals whatever my file path is. If I change my working directory, I could just say file equals and then subset data.csv. But what I'm showing you here today is how to use the pasting in the file path. So this, remember, I can paste this together like this, and then here is the file path that I could have just typed in. And if I run this, then within my documents folder, I should now, yes I do, I should now have a file called subsetdata.csv, which I could read in later using read.csv. And if you look at the help file for read.csv, there are various options that can sometimes make that a cleaner process if you want to. If you're hoping to write your data out to a text file, you can use write.table. Also, as we discussed earlier when we first opened this data set, you can save your data set as a .r object. I'm going to correct that right here. You can save it as a .r object. And if I do that here, then I'll suddenly have a file called subset.r within my documents folder, and indeed I do. You don't want to try to open that one directly, but the idea is that if later I wanted to load that into a work session, all I have to do is say load and then file equals, and this is just equal to the file path. Again, that string, that's my file path. So loading and saving can be very helpful because, once I've saved that R object, I can clear my workspace, I can do all kinds of other things, and then load it in again and be right back where I was without having to take the time to read in the big original data set. I want to mention a couple other R commands. One is the by command. What it does is it takes a variable and it applies some function to it in groups. So for example, suppose I want to take the mean of the times per year variable in groups by this delay variable. So I can do that here. Now what I get is all NAs because the mean of a vector containing an NA is an NA. That's a good thing because you want to know if you have NAs. You don't want to just automatically drop missing values. There are ways to drop them, but you want to be doing it purposefully. But the point is when you're using the by command, this is what will happen. You'll get the mean of the times per year for each value of the clean variable. You can look at the help page to understand more about this. Here's another version of it that won't give us NAs. Let me look at the length of the times per year vector in subsets based on delay clean factor. So if I do this, it's actually the same thing as if I had just said I want a table of the clean factor. It gives me the same numbers. It's another way to ask that question. There's also a command I won't show you an example of here, but I do want to mention the merge command in R is a way to combine multiple data sets. So suppose that you had multiple data sets, maybe on whether a whole bunch of people who lived in a certain part of Ohio voted in 2013 and whether people in that same part of Ohio voted in 2014. If there's some overlap between the people in those two data sets and you have ID numbers for them, you can use the merge command to create one data set that shows whether those same people voted in those 2 years. And if you are an econ person who's been using Stata, that may be something that you're familiar with, and R does do that as well. One last idea. When we've been making plots, we've just been doing the following: making a plot, looking at it, and then if we want to keep it, we can, for example, say file save. And there's multiple formats we can choose, like PDF or JPEG. And suppose I want to make another plot. Here's another one. This is the histogram of the times per year. And that works great, especially when you are working on your visualization and you want to quickly make changes to it. But once your visualizations are final, it's often helpful to send all of the graphics together to one particular file. So here's a way to do that. If I say PDF and then in the parentheses file equals and put in a file path, and remember that this here is just another way to specify this file path, and I should do this, so I will. So here's a way to specify this file path. Looks just like this with no space there. So if I do this, nothing happens. Okay, nothing happens. You can see that a PDF file now exists called place to put graphics within my documents folder, but I should not double click on that right now because right now that file is open and ready to begin receiving plots. So if I have that PDF command running and then I run my plot command, notice that no plot appears because instead that final version of the plot that I created, we're pretending this is the final version even though that was a terrible visualization, that graphic is being sent straight to the PDF. If I make another one, that one is also now sent straight to that PDF. I don't see it on my screen, and when I'm done sending files straight to my PDF, I can say dev.off, device.off. And so now if I were to go look at this, I can open this file. And what I'm going to see there is my graphics, and it takes a second. There we go. One on each page. This is a nice way to send your graphics cleanly to a particular PDF. And note that you can use JPEG as your function instead of PDF if you'd like to create JPEG files.